out here fixing a few things on the daily to get things started. You can see, look at the mess that I found when I pulled my fender liner out. Look at all that. It's like sand. It's like literally nasty dirt and sand and all kinds of nastiness and all these nuts and stuff from probably squirrels and chipmunks and whatever else climbing up in here. I've seen one up on top of my wheel just chilling a couple times when I came out here, so they must have been trying to store some nuts down in the fender liner. But anyways, that's besides the point. I was having some issues with my turn signal bulb, so you know, I just went to throw a new turn signal bulb in because I figured the bulb was out because the running light wouldn't turn on but the signal worked. And of course it wasn't that simple because the brand new bulb didn't work. I ended up testing the wiring and we had a ground wire issue with this turn signal. So for some reason the ground was having issues. I've had ground wire issues with other lights too. I forgot. I think the high beam on this side actually had an issue and something else. What else had an issue? I don't remember. But basically I have 3 ground wires now tied in together that go to this one eyelet to this one bolt on the body, and now everything works fine. These cars do have some weird ground issues sometimes, and I think it's partly just because of the way the harness runs across the front of the car. It runs in front of the radiator here on like a little support. Probably something where it rubs or something. But now that we got that fixed up, I'm gonna go ahead and look over and try to figure out exactly what's going on with our fuel gauge, because I think I might have a better idea of what could be our issue. So I've looked on a lot of different forums and I've looked at a lot of different wiring diagrams. Since I do have a factory service manual in PDF form on my PC, I can look through and kind of look through wiring diagrams and get an idea of what's going on. And basically, this connector right here is usually hidden up behind here. I got it loose from its connection and you can see the wires run up into the car there. There's the other end of the connector right there. It's right in here. This is the tie rod, obviously the tie rod end, the bellow boot right there, and that's the connection. It's tucked up in here. I've looked everything over the best I could with a flashlight and a scope. Followed these wires up because some of them go to the ground point, which is up inside the car, like right around here. Now in this car, it happens to be a pain because not only are these AC lines in the way, but this motor mount as well, so you can barely even see the ground point down under here. But those are the wires that run back under the car through all of this insulation and wire loom and run all the way back to this connector right here. This is like the evap canister or something, and the gas tank is right here. And the wires for the fuel pump and some other things run down to this connector. And then it runs down here and into this giant loom that runs across the bottom of the car, the fuel lines and the brake lines right here. Right here, all this fancy electrical tape, there was a little bit of a gap in it, so I peeled it apart a little to inspect all the wires, and everything looks good. And I forgot which is the relay signal and the fuel level signal. But so basically my plan is I am going to continuity check every single wire in this connector. There's 6 wires, so I might as well check them all. I have it unplugged here, and you can see I already, again, I took these apart a little bit to inspect and make sure there's nothing obviously broken, but I cannot find anything. I rigged up this wire here with little butt connector plug that I actually cut so that it will fit into each individual cavity in the connector, so that way I can use that to plug into one of the connectors and run the wire down to the other end of the car, touch one of the probes of my multimeter to the wire, touch the other probe to the wires in the connector, and touch each wire until I get a beep. I'm still betting that one of our ground wires is the source of the issue. I guess we'll wait and see. Let's start testing some continuity and see what happens. Got our first wire plugged in. We got good continuity, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do that with the other 5.
A few moments later.
Well, unfortunately, every one of our wires had good continuity. I was low-key kind of hoping that one of those wires was gonna be having a problem, but that's not the case. So the only other thing I could do is I could try to study the diagrams a little more and verify which ground wire controls the fuel level sensor, and try to tap into that and create my own ground point somewhere under the car just to see if that gets the gauge working. Because if that's the case, then we have a damaged ground somewhere further up in the car, which could continue to cause further issues. So I took a picture of the diagram. It's the connector that actually connects to the sending unit up on top of the gas tank. And it says over here the wires and their color coordination and what they are and which cavity they're in. We have 2 grounds, and they're just simply called grounds. And then we have the fuel level sensor and the fuel pump relay. I couldn't figure out which ground would be which, but I got to thinking about it a little bit, and basically I still have my old fuel pump here, thankfully. And after studying this a little bit, I noticed that the middle wires on the connector are actually for the fuel level sensor. This is the fuel level sensor here. One of them is a ground, and after tracing them up and looking in the middle and also looking at the diagram again, it looks like cavity number 2 is our ground for our fuel level sensor. So I should be able to use that information now and use this information here to figure out which ground is which and try to splice into it and create our own little ground just to see if that takes care of our problem. Well, I pulled a bunch more of the insulation off of the wires back here. You see I got the connector plugged in right there. After tracing the wires some more and doing some more research, this slightly bigger black ground wire is for the actual fuel pump, and then the smaller one is for the sending unit from everything I could tell. And as you can see, I already just peeled some of the insulation away, pulled the wires apart, and actually stuck a wire through the middle and wrapped it around just so that we can test this. And I got a little ground spot here. I went ahead and drilled a small hole and cleaned it up and put a screw through it with an eyelet and kind of made that semi-permanent, because if this does work, then I know I'm probably going to keep it like this, and I'm just going to permanently attach this here, run some new loom over everything. But although it would mean that we have other ground issues, at least we have a working fuel gauge for now. Hey, do we have a working fuel gauge? I think we do. I think that would be exactly where my fuel gauge would be at, actually. Oh, hallelujah. Here's the wiring in its final form, minus a little bit of electrical tape. Also went ahead and put the fender liner back in and got that all put together, so it looks like we did good today. Decided to go ahead and pull her in here and do a little oil change, and I got a little sample, car urine sample here. And I've been looking it over. I held the magnet to it and everything. There's not a flake of anything in that oil. That oil honestly looks perfect. This car does seem to lose a little bit more oil than normal, and it passed the compression test just fine. It showed like a little bit lower compression in 2 of the cylinders, but it was only like 8% difference, which isn't bad at all. So I don't know, it could be having a little bit of blow by. Gonna go ahead and finish this oil change up. I'm also gonna kind of take a look in the filter just for the heck of it, because I can, and I'm kind of just curious, but I'm sure it's perfectly fine. And after pulling the filter off and inspecting it, I don't see anything. There's a lot of dirt that was still in the pan, but after looking at the oil that actually came out of the filter, I see very little, if anything. There are no obvious signs of anything bad going on in the motor, so if it was at that point where you were seeing a lot of flakes in the oil, you would probably notice like exhaust smoke and possibly a lot more oil in the intake and just a lot of stuff. So first of all, I went ahead and ditched that Frem filter, and I got a Mobil 1 this time around. I accidentally mixed my part numbers up and got a GT filter, just slightly longer, but I mean, I guess there's not really any difference. It doesn't mess with oil pressure or anything. But I was doing a little bit of looking around, and I thought that this line here, this power steering line, was leaking a little bit before, and I wasn't super worried about it because I didn't seem to be losing barely any power steering fluid. But I was just looking at it thinking about how I should probably try to replace it soon. And then I started looking a little closer. Now I'm like, wait a second. I don't think that's power steering fluid. I often forget that these cars have ATF4 fluid in the power steering. Like, that's what's in the manual to use. But I started looking, I'm like, that's not red. That looks like oil. And it looks like it's leaked more in this area up in here and over into here even a little bit. That's oil as well, as far as I can tell. So from the looks of that, I see no oil above it, no oil coming from above. It looks like it could be a little bit of an oil pan leak here. That would explain why we are losing a little bit more oil than you'd expect. But that does seem to be oil, so that's something I'm going to check out ASAP, but I'm not too worried about it because it doesn't seem to be losing much. It definitely must be the pan gasket, because like, that's the only thing that would make sense. I don't know, guys. Let me know what you think about that down in the comments, but I'm not too worried about it. I just felt like kind of checking it out and seeing if I could figure anything else out while I was doing an oil change anyways. That is one big box. Or should I say boxes? It looks like they tried to patch a couple of them together to make this work. Maybe a big box, but it's not a super exciting box, unfortunately. This is the new fuel line for the DTS. What a mess. All right, well, I got that cleaned up a little bit and ready to be disposed of. I got our line here. It looks good, other than this looks like it might have been at an unfortunate angle, bent in packaging, but I don't think it's damaged or anything. It's just the nylon webbing or whatever. Other than that, there might be a slight bend there that shouldn't be there, but I think it's okay. There we go. That worked like a charm. With our old fuel line out, you can see just how rotted that was right here. It's really, really bad. That's why it just started leaking like crazy after we moved it a little bit. But it looks like our new fuel line is going to do the job. It has been bent a little bit right here, as you can see, but we'll go ahead and bend that and get that straightened up. It was quite the struggle getting the old line out, and mostly because of the quick connect in the back of the car. I had a lot of trouble with it. This is where the fuel line plugs in at the back of the car. It has this little quick connect fitting, and normally there's this little plastic piece that you push in here and it unlocks it. It's pretty standard stuff as far as fuel line is concerned, but the problem was it was so rusted and just caked up that nothing would come apart. And the little plastic piece in here, the little retaining clip, actually cracked on me when I was trying to remove it, which really sucks because these fittings are a pain to have to replace because they're in the nylon, all permanent. Like, repair kits for them are really hard to find, and the fittings themselves are really hard to find as well. This is a valuable little bit of information for you guys if you ever have issues with them. You can actually buy just the retaining clips themselves to replace them, rather than replace the whole fitting and go through all that, piecing it together in such a way that it doesn't leak. If you ever have one of the retaining clips break, or you have to break it to get the line out, you can buy new ones. They're a little expensive for simply a little piece of plastic, but I found these right at the local AutoZone. They're, I think, a 5/8. That was a pain. I struggled with that for quite a while, but we're good now, so we can go ahead and throw the line in and finally fire this car up. I was finally able to prime the pump for the first time. Now the battery's charged up and it peed everywhere, unfortunately. Thankfully I had that bucket handy, so it didn't go absolutely everywhere this time. But I'm pretty sure the O-rings are all messed up in the fitting, and as you can see, part of the fitting is actually still stuck here on the old line. It's just so corroded and messed up, and I didn't even realize it, but the inside of that fitting is just, it's bad. It's really bad. So I did a bunch of research. I had such a hard time finding one that was 3/8. There were some that were 3/8 nylon end, and then 5/16 steel end, and vice versa. But I finally found a repair kit for a quick disconnect that is 3/8 on both end, because there's 3/8 nylon and 3/8 metal that we're putting together with this fitting. It's a whole kit. It's got the little barb union, so we're gonna go ahead and cut the old fitting off and cut this to size, throw that all together and get it all tightened down, and hopefully this will be enough to solve our issue. One of the more sketchy things I have put together in my life, that's for sure. But it works. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't spill gas everywhere again. I doubt that I'm going to leave it like that for very long, just because it's gonna bother me. I don't know if we'll replace the whole line that comes from the fuel pump and the fuel sending unit in the tank. But I got it over 2 of the barbs and got it clamped, and I really don't see why it's a problem. I already tried priming the pump and it's looking good so far. Nothing has dripped out. Everything looks solid. So I guess everything checks out. We can go ahead and fire up this car, finally. Hallelujah. I didn't warm it up too much or anything. I still need to finish topping off with coolant and everything, but it started, and I'm going to give everything one more look over, but everything is good. No gas dripping anywhere. You can go ahead and roast me down in the comments for that barb fitting and the way I put that together for now. I probably will redo it in the near future, but it got it started today. That's the main thing, and I'm just so excited that it worked. I know some people are going to probably pick on me because I could have theoretically just replaced the O-rings and the little spacer and stuff inside the current connector rather than chop it off, put a new one on, but honestly that old one was so brittle. I was nervous even messing with it to try to plug it in. The way that connector is positioned is probably exposed to a lot more of the elements than the other connectors. I was better off to just chop it right off and splice in something else to get this car going, and it is going, which I'm so happy about. It's been so long since this car has been running. It's so cold. Woo. Woo. And also, once again, because of the high winds, I can't film as much outside as I would normally like to. But, you know, at least we got a video for you guys. I did not originally plan to make this into its own separate video. I planned to include bits and pieces of this throughout some of the other bigger episodes. I had to put this together and throw it out first for you guys because I thought it was pretty interesting, and we figured out the gas gauge issue. It ended up being some weird ground issues. We ended up having weird ground issues with the turn signal bulbs too. I've had them with light bulbs a lot in the past, and I think there's something going on. Maybe it's a ground strap or a main ground location, and I'm going to figure it out, and then I'm going to kind of regret cutting and splicing my own grounds for everything. Either way, I don't really care. This car is like the car that I don't really worry as much about, and I just kind of send it, just have fun with it, and you know, it's my daily. Well, something else that I just realized is that my horn actually does not work either, and I'm wondering if one of the main ground locations is having problems, and that's why I'm having a lot of issues with like lights not grounding correctly, and the horn now, and the fuel gauge and stuff like that. So I'm going to be studying some of the diagrams and stuff that I have and trying to figure out a little bit more. But hit the thumbs up button on this video if you guys think it's interesting, and if you would like it if I made some more videos on any weird wiring stuff that I end up doing. I also plan to upgrade the sound system in this car very soon as well, and do things like that. So again, let me know by hitting the thumbs up button if you enjoy this kind of video, because it is a lot of fun for me to make. It's some of the stuff that I really enjoy doing most. Stay safe out there, guys. I love you so much. Thank you so much for the support. You rock. God bless you guys, and I will see you in the next one.